Welcome to the Journal of the Southwest Radio Hour podcast, a production of the University of Arizona Southwest Center in the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences. I'm Jeff Bannister. I'm speaking today with Dr. Nicolás Pineda Pablos, a researcher at the Colegio de Sonora in Hermosillo. Dr. Pineda is one of Mexico's foremost experts on urban water provision, and he has several long-term collaborations with researchers here at the University of Arizona. This is the second of two interviews we've done together, and here Dr. Pineda brings us up to speed on Hermosillo's current water situation, which is not especially promising, to put it mildly. Hermosillo, the state capital, is a Sonoran Desert city with close to 1 million people, similar in size to Metro Tucson. And, much like Tucson, Hermosillo faces some profound climate-related challenges, not least of which are a swiftly warming and drying environment, ongoing drought, and the threat of ever more severe storms. Mexico's north and northwest are experiencing some of the worst drought conditions in recorded history, with reservoir levels down by as much as 70 or 80% in some regions, affecting life and livelihood in both rural and urban spaces. The Abelardo Rodriguez Reservoir on the eastern outskirts of Hermosillo has been completely dry for years now and is a stark visual reminder of the city's ever-precarious hydraulic situation. Some officials are pushing for construction of new reservoirs, but experts and activists question the wisdom of new infrastructure, especially if it means other solutions, including more equitable and socially just ones, get pushed aside. Dr. Pineda is part of a diverse group of concerned citizens and experts called Hermosillo Cómo Vamos. Hermosillo, how are we doing? Working together to provide research-based solutions to this hairy problem. Dr. Pineda talks about all of this and much more, including the question of whether Hermosillo is facing a so-called day zero scenario, in which the city becomes unable to provide a basic, reliable supply of potable water to its citizens. This is an important conversation for anyone living in the U.S. desert Southwest and borderlands. We thank you, as always, for your time and attention. Okay, Dr. Nicolás Pineda, welcome to Journal of the Southwest Radio.
My pleasure. Good to hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. So I want to ask you about, we're here to talk today about the water situation in Hermosillo. And I'm just wondering, before we do that, if you could just give us a little background about yourself and the city and the sort of some of the things that you want to talk about.
Well, thanks very much to the Southwest Center for this opportunity. My name is Nicolás Pineda. I work at the Colegio de Sonora in Hermosillo. I made a PhD at the University of Texas at Austin more than 25 years ago, and my dissertation was on the topic of urban water supply in Mexico. And so since that time, I started out with this topic. And since I live in a desert city as Hermosillo, this has been I have a very interesting topic and provides me a lot of opportunities for research. Where is Hermosillo? Hermosillo is in northwest Mexico, not very far from Arizona. So we're in a desert region, and we have very high temperatures. Every year we'll have more than 40 degrees centigrade, which is more than 112 degrees Fahrenheit. And we have 4 or 5 months with that kind of temperatures, not every day, but very frequently. So we're in a very hot desert with hot summers. And the additional complication is that we've got a growing urbanizing population. So this is a perfect storm for a water crisis. And the recent complication is that we've been in a drought for the last at least one decade, but the last 2 years, 2024 and 2023, have been very, very low in the rainfall. And so we're starting to feel the heat of the drought. And since we're in the springtime at this year of 2025, we're looking forward to having a big crisis this summer with water supply for this city of Hermosillo. Imagine that you're living in a city with temperatures of with higher than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and there's no water in the taps. And that's the big problem, and so we're trying to prevent that, and we're figuring out which are the best strategies, projects, policies to try to avoid and not get into day zero of water supply for the city, and that's in general the our situation here in this city of Hermosillo, which I've been trying to study for well almost 25 years already. That's my main line of research at the Colegio de Sonora.
I think not everyone who listens to this podcast certainly knows that Hermosillo shares the Sonoran Desert with Phoenix and Tucson. So we have three major urban metropolitan areas in the Sonoran Desert. And of course, and I think, they obviously have distinct qualities about them, but I think some of the processes that you mentioned a minute ago are pretty similar across those three cities. A growing urban population, a quickly warming climate, lack of water. All of those things are things that we're experiencing in the cities of Southern Arizona as well. So I think, there's a lot of resonance with what you're saying across these areas.
Well, yes, you're right. This is the main metropolitan city in Northwest Mexico. We're not exactly in the border. We're about 3 hours from driving from the border. And Hermosillo is already this year is getting into 1 million population city. So it's quite a city already. The problem is our water supply is very scarce, and the city was built along a small river called the Sonora River, which is not a very now it's not a permanent river. It's rather an intermittent river, which is dried out most of the year. And so the city relies 2/3 of its water supply comes from from two aquifers. One is east and one is west of the two aquifers, and they are already very much drafted or overexploited. But anyway, they keep on providing us some water. Since last year, since 2024, our reservoirs almost completely dried out. The Sonora River, there are two reservoirs. One is what we call Abelardo Reservoir, which has been dried for almost 2 decades already. But the main reservoir is the Molinito Reservoir, which is higher up in the river. That provides part of the city supply, but since 2024, an aqueduct was built. It's called the Aqueduct Independencia. Was built to transfer water from another basin, and it brings water from the Yaqui River. And so at the moment, about 1/3 of our water supply comes from two reservoirs, the Molinito and the one in the Yaqui River. And the other 2/3 come from the aquifer. The city has a little less than 100 wells. Some of them are to the east in one aquifer, and some of them are to the west in another aquifer. But as I told you, they are already overdrafted. The problem in this year, 1925, is that the Molinito Reservoir is already dried out, with the other aqueduct coming from a larger river, which is the Yaqui River, and brings water from a larger reservoir. That aqueduct is only allowed to bring a certain amount of water, which in cubic meters is 35,000 cubic meters of water per year. So the infrastructure doesn't allow us to bring more water than that. And so the situation for this year, we're expecting to have a shortfall or short provision of water for the months of May and June. And I don't know if we're gonna. Many people is expecting to have rationing, and I expect that not to become the policy or the strategy, because when you ration water, the pipe network is damaged because you're not able to wet it a few hours and dry it out in some other time of the year. So that process throughout some time will completely destroy the pipe network. So I think perhaps one of the strategies will be not to completely dry out the pipe network, but to actually perhaps diminish just the water provision to lower the pressure. And so perhaps the people will complain. There are other strategies that we're trying to put forward as well.
So before we get into the broader panorama of the 2025, the situation in 2025 with summer approaching, I would actually like to see if you could take us through a little bit of the history of water scarcity, and some of the past kind of approaches that Hermosillo has taken. And maybe you could also walk us through a little bit of the existing urban infrastructure, hydraulic infrastructure.
Well, the foundation of this city of Hermosillo is due to the fact that this is the last point where the Sonora River had permanent water. That happened in the 18th century. So that's when the city was founded in this exactly this point, and because there was water available. And actually, the old name of the city, which is Pitic, means the juncture of two rivers, the Sonora River and the San Miguel River, which is an affluent of the Sonora. So they get together here, and farther west to the city, the river disappears. It actually becomes underground and has feeding up an aquifer to the west of the city, which is the aquifer of the Costa de Hermosillo. So the city is located in this point. Further west, we have a pure desert. At least in old times, it was completely desert. And the city has been able to grow due to infrastructure. So since one century ago, it started to tap water from the river to the city, and a dam was built first in 1948, which is the dam Abelardo Rodriguez, provided the city the chance to grow a little further. And later on, there has been some transfer from agriculture to the city. And more recently, it started out in 2014. An aqueduct was built to transfer water from another basin, which is the Yaqui River Basin. This aqueduct is called the Independencia Aqueduct. It struck a conflict with the farmers in the south of the state, and even with the Yaqui ethnic group, because they've been opposing this Independencia aqueduct. But anyway, this aqueduct was built and it started to operate in 2014. And it provided a new source of water for the city. So the city keep on growing. And this year, 2025, the city is getting, as I told you, a population of 1 million. That's more or less the population of the city. But the complication this year is that we've got a very severe drought. And the last 2 years, the precipitation or rainfall has been very low. On 2023, it rained just a little less than half of the average of the city. And something very similar, a little few millimeters more than in 2023. The same problem we had in 2024. And now we're in the springtime in 2025. And the utility already made estimations that we want to have a sort of 20% deficit of water. Supposedly, the city will need 5,000 liters per second in the peak hours of May and June this year. But the only available water allows to provide only 4,000 liters per second. So that's only 75% of the required of the demand. And so that's the crisis for this year. That's the situation or the setting of this crisis. And what are we proposing to do?
I actually, if I could just have you pause for just a minute on something that I was thinking about as you're talking, and that is kind of a hypothetical. What do you think the situation would be like if that Independencia aqueduct were not delivering water, were not in existence, not delivering water to Hermosillo? What would the situation be like?
Well, I think the city grew because of the Independencia aqueduct. If there was no this aqueduct a little more than 10 years ago, that was in 2014, the city had to stop or at least slow down very much the growth that it's been experiencing. And otherwise, the city would not be very appealing for investments or for growth. Because of the Independencia Aqueduct, this city has been able to keep on growing. That where I would brief the situation with the Independencia Aqueduct. And actually, at the moment, I feel that the Sonora State has to decentralize more its population because the city is in many ways is meeting the limits in terms of water availability. And the solutions that are being proposed at the moment, the short run solutions are not very long run solutions. For this summer, first, some water has to be transferred from agriculture to the city. Because you have to know that there are still some agriculture around the city. It's mainly underground water irrigation agriculture, and this is all planned by the government. There is no private market here for water. It has to be made by governments. They are either buying, renting new wells from farmers for the city. And that would be perhaps the main solution, and that would be on the supply side. On the demand or consumption side of, we're undertaking, and when I say we, I mean a citizen organization called Hermosillo Cómo Vamos. We're promoting, together with the municipal government and the water utility, we're promoting a very big or large campaign with the consumers to conserve water, to moderate their water consumption. We are trying to teach people even how to use the gray waters for housing irrigation of pots or gardens. There's a very important campaign as well to fix leaks. That's more or less the two sides of the problem. And I don't know how we're going to do on May and June, which are the main summer and hot months of the year for the city. But I hope that some measures are being taken, and afterwards we'll know if these campaigns are being effective. Some of the problems with this with the strategies to face this crisis is that there's no full cooperation between governments. I think there are different. The cities is run by a political party in the state, and the federal government. I belong to a different political party. And so sometimes they vie for power, or they try to make the other lose in some way. And as a citizen and as a citizen group, we're trying to make them to cooperate and put aside the political incentives or the political purposes they've got, and to make the appropriate investment for the city, because the city requires a very urgent investment, such as how to bring the new water from agriculture to the city. It requires new pipes and new ways to introduce this agricultural water to the city network, and that's been part of the problem with the government.
Well, I think one of the things that I want to ask you, well, I definitely am interested in the political, the water, the hydraulic politics that you're talking about, and the way that it ties into the technology, the actual existing water infrastructure. And one of the things that I think that you brought up a minute ago that really caught my attention is the problems with the water grid. So you're talking about leaks and the kind of the poor state of repair
Yes.
of some of the system. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I think that, and that's a very key issue. The city is not effective in its water management. It's not efficient at all. And actually, we think that we've been supplied water for two Hermosillos. I mean, the accounted for water for the city is just half, or 21% of the water that is introduced to the distribution network. Only 21% is actually accounted for.
Hmm.
The rest of it, of the water, is lost. Is lost, let's say, for a good cost, a reasonable cost is evaporation, but also there are a lot of leaks. But more than that, there are some clandestine tappings of waters as well. Many people use not to pay the service and connect to the network by themselves, and so that's a water loss for the city. And most of all, what is not accounted is that there are many users or consumers who don't measure or don't pay the water. And I mean, these are like public buildings or parks or some public institutions who receive the water from the utility for free, and they are not measured. And the few parks we've got in the city, I think they receive water, and the water is not measured, and we consider that's an incentive for not using it in a very effective and efficient way, and perhaps even to waste the water. So, as citizen group, we're demanding that all of the water supply should be metered. The city is divided in 113 hydrometric sectors, which are not used for benchmarking. And we're also demanding that the city promotes more efficiency, measuring both input and output of water for each water sector, for each hydraulic sector. And that would provide the city a better overview, or where are being leaks, where are clandestine tappings of water. That's a big problem for this city, and I think it's very common to many Mexican cities, and I guess in other cities in underdeveloped countries, it's about the same. My advice is that we have to become more developed and very technical, and not being politically biased or oriented when we have water management. So there's a big pressure to have a better water governance for the city,
Hmm.
and because at the same time, this water loss is becoming the opportunity for the city in these new times of drought. If we increase efficiency in water management, we have plenty of leeway to gain water without actually increasing the water supply, just making the pipe network more efficient, the water distribution more efficient. We can actually gain an important margin for growth for the city, and
Hmm.
so that's in addition to that situation. we're promoting that the households fix their leaks as well. Another measurement is that we're asking the utility to install meters for every customer. At the moment, just half of the customers are metered, and there's another half which are not metered. And when households are not metered, they've got an incentive to not care very much about how much water they're using. If you pay always the monthly the same amount for the water bill, so you don't care if you use more, and so we consider that's an incentive for wasting water. So, and actually, the utility has been responding, and they announced that this year, 2025, they will install 40,000 meters for customers. However, this is just a very small percentage of the customers, because the city has more a little bit less or more 350,000 customers, and when just half of them are metered, and you add up 40,000, many of them are just to replace broken meters. So you're not actually solving completely the question. We're demanding that in the future, all of the customers have to have a meter, and all of the consumptions have to be metered, and to be able to improve the efficiency of the system. So we have to measure all the incomes, all the inputs of water, all of the supplies of water, as well as all of the deliveries or consumption of water. And that's one of the opportunity areas.
Nicolás, I wanted to ask you, a little follow-up here, which is, so you're part of this organization called Hermosillo Cómo Vamos. I read, so you sent me some a little bit of information and some of the studies and the writing that you have done for that group, some very informative work. And I'm just wondering, do you feel like you have the attention of officials? Do you feel like the business community is getting behind some of the initiatives that you're promoting? What's the situation there with this citizens group?
Yes, a very important issue. I think we're in very good communication with the utility and with the local government. And we're not very sure if we're in good communication with the other levels of government. I mean, the state government or the federal government. And actually, very recently, there was a legal initiative at the local Congress by some deputies there. And they tried to make the utility not to charge too much to the customers, despite they are not metered. And we consider this a populist initiative because it's not incentivizing or promoting or supporting that all of the customers be metered. And so we have to have a fair rate. I agree with that. The rate has to be fair. We're not trying to damage or to charge too much to low-income people, but that shouldn't be a reason for not charging them or not metering them or not trying to promote a more rational or more conservation or more rational use of water at homes. So we're trying to cast light in these issues because we think that the water should not be managed in a political way just to benefit the party or just you have to take care of the environment as well, and that our sources are being depleted, and we have to take care of efficiency, not just that you don't charge very much in your water bills, and so all of it has to be brought in to have a more comprehensive policy, not just not charge the poor or things like that. I think we have a good attention from the general public, and in some way we have to remove some of these ideas that consider just one area of the water management, but not don't have a view of the general situation, and that's more or less the situation with the governments and the government cooperation. We're trying to make them cooperate and to undertake joint efforts and projects to improve the city management and the city water supply, because otherwise the city won't be sustainable anymore.
Right. I think that's the thing that is so critical that you mentioned at the very top of this interview, which was, Hermosillo, like other cities in the arid, U.S. West and northern Mexico, are facing the very question of their very economic viability, because their water sources are drying up, or they're overtapped, or they're not well managed. I think this might be a good moment to also zoom out a little bit into the broader hydraulic panorama. And I kind of wanted to ask you a little bit about something that you had mentioned earlier, which was the use of wastewater. There are technological ideas that are often on the table. One of them is, of course, wastewater, so-called wastewater reuse, and then there is desalination as well. Hermosillo is not far from the edge of the Gulf of California. So could you tell us a little bit about some of those things that might be on the table?
Yes, I think it's key, a key topic, and let me provide you a bit rounded figures about the city water management. It's provided to the city 135 million cubic meters. I'm going to talk in million cubic meters, everything. So the supply is 135. The accounted for water is about a little more than 60 million cubic meters, 62, 63 cubic meters. These are figures from the last 3 years. So there's a lot of unaccounted for water. However, the city has also a wastewater treatment plan, which was started to operate in 2014. And this, together with other two smaller or medium-sized treatment plants and a few smaller ones, they treat about 75 million cubic meter. So the utility accounts and the bills only, let's say, 64 million cubic meter, and the treatment plan is treating 75 million cubic meter. And at the moment, even when the plant is already 10 years old, most of that water is not taken advantage of. There are 75 million cubic meters, which is larger than the amount that the utility bills to the customers. Some of it is used by some ejidos for further crops, or I think they started perhaps to switch crops to with treated water, because they used to do that before the existence of the treatment plan, and they used to have these crops of fodder. But now what I think is very important is that the city do several things with that water, with that treated wastewater. First, I think the city needs that water to irrigate the parks and the green areas of the city, and increase our green public parks in the city as well. So we need that treated water. Also, it's needed to promote new industries or new growth, perhaps, and we could use that treated water. So the problem is that the industrial parks are built far from the treatment plant, and so a new redistribution of the industries has to be made within the city. While the industrial park, the main industrial park of Hermosillo, is to the east, the treatment plant is to the 6 kilometers to the west, and so there has to be a new development of factories and industries which could use treated water. And most of all, I think that the treated water, which, as I told you, is about 75 million cubic meter, it should be used to recharge the aquifers. The problem is that there's some altitude difference. So the government and the authorities have to figure out which one could be the best strategy to bring the treated water to the east and recharge the aquifer, which is actually providing the water for the city. And that could be a part of the solution for the city in the let's say in the medium or long run, not exactly for this summer, but in the future we have to find ways to recharge the aquifer, and I think the treated water that would be a perfect match for that problem. So the same as with the inefficiency, the same is with the treated wastewater. From a problem, we could make it an opportunity and a resource for the city. And so we just have to find the ways and make the infrastructure and refine our policies to make these ends match among them. And that could be perhaps the hope for the city in the future, and to make this city sustainable. Because otherwise, if we don't do these fixings, the city would not be sustainable, and we have to stop growing, or perhaps the welfare level of the city would start to erode and deteriorate. And that's the long run panorama. Along with the other thing that you mentioned also desalting water from the sea, or sea salination water. I don't see it very feasible for the city, Hermosillo. Hermosillo is 120 kilometers from the coast, and along the distance from Hermosillo to the sea coast, there's a farming area with wells and an aquifer which is already overdrafted and almost depleted. But it would be inconsistent to have to the salt water to bring the city, and along the way you have this agricultural irrigation district in the midway. But more than that, I think we have cheaper or less costly solutions, just making the system efficient, transferring water from agriculture to the city supply, and reusing our wastewater at our treated wastewater. I think these are the three main agenda guidelines or lines of action in the future. And I don't see that the desalting water would be a feasible solution in cost-benefit terms. It's a costly infrastructure. It has to travel 120 kilometers. That's about 70 miles, I think. To me, it would be very expensive. I think the desalination has to be promoted mainly for the coastal developments, and perhaps there could be like touristic resorts or sea resorts with desalted water, like perhaps in San Carlos, or even industrial towns with desalted water.
Yeah, it makes sense. It seems like although Hermosillo's water situation is of course dire, and we're getting ready to go into the summer months that are going to be, who knows, we may get some decent summer rains this year, but I was watching or listening to rather, we have a podcast produced by the University of Arizona for the climate assessment for the Southwest. It's the Climas podcast, and it's really interesting. They, there are a couple of climatologist guys there who are very knowledgeable, and they're always kind of trying to sort of read the tea leaves, to find out what kinds of what our water future is going to be like in the near future. And they were saying yesterday that many of the models that they're looking at are suggesting that it's not going to be a very good summer monsoon season. There are some other signals in the broader, very complicated, climatological panorama that suggests that maybe there is a little bit of hope. In listening to you, what I wanted to say here is that even though Hermosillo's water situation is difficult, it also sounds like you're saying there are lots of possibilities in the broader structure. There are some solutions that are there to be developed, and that's a very positive thing, I think.
Yes, well, very important what you mentioned about the outlook of the climate for this summer. Actually, I follow Clima's outlooks as well of the University of Arizona, and I know at the end of every month they publish an outlook for the climate. So I'm waiting for the April. Outlook. I don't know if it's already out, but since you mentioned it's very important for our city as well. What I've been reading so far is that the transition between El Nino and La Nina, this oceanic phenomena, which influence very much our region for rain or no rain, I think they are in a neutral position, and so the transition between El Nino into La Nina would bring perhaps more water, has been like very long, and there's a neutral. I don't know if they are in between, and La Nina hasn't finished to come in. Some people is very hopeful that this summer could be uh, more rainy or rainier than the past years. But what I've been telling is that there's a lot of uncertainty, and we don't know for sure that the drought is over. So we better prepare for the pessimistic scenario. We need very badly to have heavy rains, a very rainy season with lots of showers to replenish our reservoirs and perhaps recharge the aquifers as well, so to give a new breath to our city. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, we've got options. We have this is a very it's not easy solution, but it's very important for the city to develop to become more efficient in water management, to reuse the wastewater, the treated wastewater, and perhaps to transfer or to exchange water with farmers around the city, with agricultural districts, which are not very far from us, and prior or instead of desalting water for the city. We have to become efficient. We have to reuse our wastewaters, and we have to have an integral watershed management, where you bring into the model not just the city management, but also agriculture, but also the industrial uses of water. And so with that, we can expect to be a sustainable city in the future if we moderate our growth as well, and perhaps the Sonora has to decentralize and develop other regions of the state. This is quite a large state, perhaps a little bit less than Arizona, but there are areas of the state which are underdeveloped, and perhaps they could have much more water than this desert area of Hermosillo. And so that's my outlook for the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I very much appreciate what you're saying there. It's so important to look at the larger panorama, the diversity of sources, the diversity of solutions, and I think it sounds to me that with your organization, Hermosillo Cómo Vamos, and probably other organizations, that's exactly what you're trying to do, is to push for a broader view. Nicolás, I don't know if you have if you have any thoughts you want to leave us with here, or any final take home lessons, or anything else that you would like to say to our listeners.
Yes, well, there's the other ingredient that as residents of the desert and living in a desert city as Hermosillo, we have to adapt to our climate. And there are a lot of measures we should take in the way we live and the way we build our houses in the future, because there's this nexus with power as well. We shouldn't expect to use more power because that's expensive as well. And in Hermosillo, we're promoting to having more these cityscape gardens, not to use exotic plants, which people is used to them, but to perhaps to have parks and gardens according to our region, which don't require as much water and irrigation, but also the ways our houses are built with trees, and how do we use the shadows, and how do we have our windows, etc. Even the materials of the houses has to be think over. And how we are living with this. We live also in a heat island. And so there's a lot of cement and asphalt in the city, and so all those things we have to think it over. And I know the city of Tucson has been very innovative in these areas, and we're trying to learn some of the lessons of the city of Tucson, and bring our own solutions as well to make the city more resilient and sustainable for the future. And then that would be perhaps my takeaway. We cannot live with green lawns for golf courts here in this kind of cities. So what we do has to be adapted for this kind of region and for the desert. Otherwise, we don't have any future. And for the long run, we have to moderate our growth and decentralize more. This Sonora State has been very much centralizing in the capital city of Hermosillo. And while other regions are being actually depopulated, or even the south of the state, when there's more water, I think we have to send some of the factories and the industrial and tertiary activities to the south of the state as well, and not concentrate everything in the north. So that would be another approach to the problem.
Well, Nicolás, that's probably a good place to end. I think I would like to ask if maybe we could schedule a check-in in a few months down the road, just to see, hopefully at that point we've had some good rains. I think this conversation is really important, for a variety of reasons. One of them is that we have so much to share between these two desert cities, Tucson and Hermosillo, which are roughly now about the same size. And although their dynamics are different in many respects, there are lots of similarities. So I think this is a really important conversation to continue.
Yes, I appreciate very much the opportunity you provide me. I think we have a lot of things to exchange and perhaps to learn from each other. And I know, as I told you, Tucson is very innovative, and the University of Arizona is the leader in these topics of water management. So I appreciate very much the opportunity, and hope to keep up these exchanges in the future.
Okay, well, that sounds very good, Dr. Pineda. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
I thank you, Jeff Bannister.